convention, and the other is signature. This case does not involve signature gathering. This is strictly involved with voting and what happened after the convention. Utah has a rule that provides that if a person, at least in the Republican primary convention, if a person gets 60% of the votes, they're the candidate. The only other way you can be a candidate for the primary is if you gather signatures. Celeste Malloy chose not to gather signatures. Colby Jenkins chose not to gather signatures, and they went to the convention. Colby Jenkins did not get the requisite 60%. He got 50-something. Celeste Malloy got in the 40s, and so they were required under state law to face one another at the Republican primary, which was held just a few weeks ago. I think it was June 25th. That race, believe it or not, here we are July 8th, has still not been decided. It appears that Celeste Malloy is ahead. It appears that her numbers have maintained in the 200 to 300 range ahead of Colby Jenkins, which is astronomically close when you consider an election to that extent. But Colby Jenkins filed a lawsuit. That is, the Colby Jenkins for Congress Committee filed a lawsuit on July 5th. That was 3 days ago. It's a fairly simple lawsuit, but it asks for the following. For the election official, the county clerk of Washington County, in his official capacity there as the elections clerk in Washington County, to provide the ballot list of all of the voters that were part of this confused election names. And let me just explain it a little bit more because I just butchered it. What Colby Jenkins is alleging is this, that in Utah, every ballot that is returned by mail, in the mail-in ballots, must be first checked to ensure that the signature on the envelope matches the signature in the voter registration records. In other words, we don't want people voting for their friends or family. If you're voting by mail, you sign the envelope, they compare that with your signature. If they're both good to go, your vote is counted. If a poll worker determines that the signature is not reasonably consistent with the signature on the voter registration records, then the law requires poll workers to reject the ballot, but not reject it outright, to contact the individual voter and inform them that their signature is in question, and they can then cure the ballot, if that makes sense. So you mail in your ballot, the elections clerk there says, hey, wait a minute, this signature doesn't look right. They'll contact you and say, hey, there's a question about your signature. Do you want to be counted or not? If you go in, you cure the ballot, your ballot is counted. There was a deadline to get that done, which is today, July 8th. As of July 3rd, 5 days ago, 531 ballots in Washington County were rejected because poll workers deemed that the signature on the ballot did not match the signature on the voter registration records, and they had not yet come in to cure the poll. Why is it important in Washington County? I'll tell you why, just looking from the outside in, because other counties had equally close numbers. But notwithstanding that Celeste Malloy is a Washington County native, notwithstanding that she is the former deputy county attorney down there, Colby Jenkins seems to be leading in Washington County. In other words, the numbers there seem to be in his favor. So it would be in his best interest politically, if he's going to pick a county to have their votes counted again, to maybe start in Washington, where he seems to be doing very well. The Deseret News reported that voters had to cure their, and I mentioned this before, their invalid ballots in Washington County by July 8th, after which time their ballots will not be counted. So, in accordance with Utah law, the Washington County elections clerk, the clerk, has to create a list of the uncured ballots cast by voters in Washington County and make those available. That sort of make those available is the question that's on the ticket here. So the Jenkins campaign requested a copy of those. They submitted what's called a grandma request, Government Records Access Management Act. That's how we get records in Utah. The feds have their own designation for grandma, but it's basically saying, hey, I want some government records. In this case, I want voting records, and I want to have those made available to me. Interestingly, Jenkins' campaign made the same request with Salt Lake County, and Salt Lake County just turned them over. They said, we have a duty to abide by the law. Here are the voting records. the allegedly invalid ballots. You can have a look at them. Washington County went different. They said, we're not turning them over. And they said, in defense of their position, that these are private records. These are records that people just aren't entitled to. And so they had a hearing on that very issue today. They had court today in Washington County, and the issue on the judge's table was whether or not to issue what's called a writ of mandamus, which is sort of what it sounds like, a mandate, forcing the county to turn over the records. In other words, they're saying, Judge, we want you, as a judge in Washington County, to order the Washington County clerk to turn over the records. And they cite Utah law and say, look, you're required to do this because that's what Utah law says. The judge found differently. The judge said, you know what, I don't think that's what the law says, and I believe that there's an exception to this rule if it relates to people's privacy. And so what the judge said was this, that the grandma request was denied, that the writ of mandamus is denied, that the county clerk chose not to disclose the list, and that was a reasoned excuse. That was a reason to deny the petition. The judge determined that the county clerk acted appropriately, and while Washington County said granting the relief sought would benefit Jenkins and harm his opponent, this would encourage vote shopping by county to cure lists deemed favorable to a candidate, sort of what I talked about earlier. The judge agreed and said, we can't just have county clerks repairing this every time there's a request. It creates voter confusion. All of a sudden, campaign volunteers are knocking on doors to get this cured, and it's a matter of voter privacy. So the judge denied the petition. This is a step backwards for the campaign of Colby Jenkins. We'll see whether or not he takes that up to the Supreme Court. Probably will. Probably needs to do that in fairly short order. And whether the Supreme Court even takes it remains to be seen. But that's a case that was decided just today, just a couple of hours before this show started, where the Colby Jenkins campaign is trying to get voting records from Washington County as it relates to uncounted voting files. I hope that made sense. I'm trying to make a legal issue into something we can talk about more appropriately in terms of the show. When we come back after the break, I talked earlier about a law in Oklahoma following a law in Louisiana requiring states to teach the Bible and to have the Bible in the classroom. We'll talk about that after the break. Stay with us.
Just 2 weeks left before the historic announcement.
Tim is going to Paris. He'll be live for us on KSL all that week.
Get special coverage on the final preparations and decision for Salt Lake City 2034. Listen at 7:30, 8:30, and 10:30 in the morning this week on KSL News Radio.
Attention homeowners considering roof replacement in 2024. Light up your home this July with Master Roofing. Schedule your roof replacement by the end of July and receive a free V-Lux sun tunnel valued at $1,200. Perfect for brightening your bathrooms and hallways. Don't miss out. Visit masterroofingutah.com and schedule your free assessment and claim your free V-Lux sun tunnel. Call 801-383-0072 or visit masterroofingutah.com today. Light up your home with Master Roofing.
Healthcare with human kindness is here. It's at Common Spirit Health. Hospitals, clinics, and caregivers all connected to advance healthcare in Colorado, Kansas, and Utah. Together, we have a common purpose, partnering with you in health and healing using powerful medicine, powerful technology, and the greatest power of all, human kindness. You'll know it when you see it, because human kindness is in every care site and in every caregiver. Common Spirit Health. Hello, human kindness.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hey, what are you doing up on the step stool?
About to clean these light fixtures. The whole family's coming over, and if there's even a speck of dust in the house, my abuela will find it.
Here, I got a Swiffer duster to help with that.
A Swiffer what?
A Swiffer duster. It has this cool extendable handle that reaches 6 feet to get high and low, with fluffy dusters that easily trap and lock dust.
So, no more step stool?
No more step stool.
Easily trap and lock dust from hard-to-reach places with the Swiffer duster. Love it or your money back.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 in the morning, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Do you worry about how much someone drinks?
Do you feel angry or depressed most of the time? Do you feel neglected or unloved?
Do you feel you attract people who tend to be compulsive or abusive?
Do you have money problems because of someone else's drinking?
Are you afraid or embarrassed to bring your friends home?
Do you feel that if the drinker loved you, she or he would stop drinking?
If you answered yes to any of these questions, you are not alone.
More than half of all adults have a family history of alcoholism.
Not everyone trapped by alcohol is an alcoholic.
Families and friends are suffering too. Al-Anon and Alateen can help. Call 1-866-200-0223 or visit alanon.org/help.
I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. In October of 1985, a woman named Cherie Warren left work at a busy Salt Lake City office
to meet her estranged husband at a downtown auto dealership.
She never made it home. Cherie's car surfaced weeks later in Las Vegas,
in the parking lot of a hotel casino.
No one knows how it got there.
Strange. It was strange.
Both Cherie's estranged husband and her boyfriend raised suspicion for investigators.
I kind of thought that he might have done something.
But no arrests were ever made. In Cold Season 3, we dig into double lives, make new connections in the case, and examine the difficulty raised by reasonable doubt.
We want answers just as much as anyone else.
They have creeps like that now too, so nothing's changed.
That's the new Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, now available anywhere you get your podcasts.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, a judge in southern Utah rejected a request for voter information from a candidate in the 2nd District Republican primary. Second, Hurricane Beryl was downgraded to a tropical storm as it moved onshore in Texas, but it could have a big impact as it moves north. And third, President Biden says any Democrats who don't think he should stay in the race for president can challenge him at the party convention. Right now, 88 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
And you're back with us on Inside Sources. My name is Greg Skordas, and I'm filling in today for Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources. Last week, the Oklahoma legislature announced a law that would require public schools, this is the state superintendent of Oklahoma schools, announced that the state would require public schools to teach the Bible and the Ten Commandments, including requiring religious text to be included in all classrooms. Now, I think last week we talked about the state of Louisiana passing a law that required this. This looks to be more like a mandate from the state superintendent, who said the following: every teacher, every classroom in the state will have a Bible in the classroom and will be teaching from the Bible in the classroom. to ensure that this historical understanding is there for every student in the state of Utah. And he went on to say that this is constitutionally mandated, and even went so far as to say there's nothing in our Constitution. Let me just read it so I can tell you exactly what he says. People say you're going to get sued. He says, if we get sued or we get challenged, we will be victorious because the Supreme Court justices that Donald Trump appointed actually are originalists, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, that look at the Constitution and not what some left-wing professor said about the Constitution. He then said this, the separation of church and state appears nowhere in the Declaration of Independence or Constitution. I read it a little differently, the whole First Amendment and 14th Amendment, but let's talk about somebody who actually knows what they're talking about here. We're joined this afternoon by Emma Camp, assistant editor of Reason Magazine. Emma, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks so much for having me.
And can you tell us how badly I butchered this, but first of all, tell me what's going on. Tell our listeners what's going on in the state of Oklahoma.
Well, there's kind of a couple moving parts here. So that state superintendent, Ryan Walters, I believe is his name, he did make the statement where he said that going forward, all public school classrooms in Oklahoma would be required to have a Bible in them. Teachers would be forced to teach from the Bible. And on first glance, that seems very unconstitutional, right? Generally speaking, you're allowed to, teachers are allowed to teach about the Bible or other religious texts where it is relevant. So, for example, you're teaching students about the Puritans and why they fled religious persecution to the Massachusetts Bay Colony, or you're providing context for a piece of literature. That's totally above board. But what he was saying was going to happen seemed outrageous. But then when you look at the actual memo, the actual directive he put out, it's quite different. It's very mild. The memo essentially states that the Bible and the Ten Commandments will have to be incorporated where appropriate in civilization, comparative religion, other history literature where appropriate, which is something that schools in Oklahoma were probably already doing. So it's very confusing because on the one hand, you have the state superintendent saying, essentially kindergarten teachers or math teachers are going to have to teach from the Bible, but the actual memo is almost certainly in keeping with schools in Oklahoma, what they're already doing. And he did do an interview with PBS where he said that he would release more specific guidance. Right now, it's quite confusing. It's not entirely clear what's going on. Right now, the memo to me at first glance seems probably above board, but who knows what else he is going to require from teachers.
So, and right now, Emma, this isn't something like we have, I think, in Louisiana, where the legislature has passed a law. This is a superintendent who is making a directive, I guess.
Yeah. So this is he's elected, I believe, but this is just a top-down directive. Yes, it is. If you are a public school in Oklahoma, this is a new rule you have to follow. Okay, but I'm looking at what he says. He says every teacher, every classroom in the state will have a Bible in the classroom and will be teaching from the Bible in the classroom. And I understand. So, go ahead, because we're qualifying this is
it a
what's
little
confusing.
Bit. Right.
He said this, but the actual memo, the actual rule that he put out doesn't say that, which is what makes this whole thing so confusing. You have someone saying every teacher is going to have a Bible in their classroom, but then the actual official rule, what was actually sent to schools that they actually have to abide by, is way less strong than that, which is why this whole thing has caused so much confusion and it is so strange.
I guess in his defense, Emma, he says this: the Bible is one of the most historically significant books and cornerstones of Western civilization. And this is kind of what you talked about earlier, along with the Ten Commandments. They will be referenced as an appropriate study of history, civilization, ethics, comparative religion, or the like, as well as their substantial influence on our nation's founders and the foundational principles of our Constitution. Is that sort of his qualification here that, hey, we're going to work this into curriculum? It's not a mandated religious text or religious study?
Well, I mean, that's the strange thing about it, because, the vast majority of public schools already essentially do this, right? Like, I went to public school in Alabama, and, the religion, we're talking about religious wars in Europe, or the Puritans starting their colonies in America, or the religious reasons why certain groups of people opposed slavery. Religion came up where relevant, just like other religions would come up where relevant in history or literature classes. That's totally above board, not a problem, almost certainly. But the weird thing about it is that he is coupling it with these blatantly unconstitutional statements that are not formal directives yet, like every classroom is going to have a Bible. And what my read on why this is happening is that these statements came out very shortly after the Oklahoma Supreme Court struck down the state's attempt to have a religious charter school. So I think those original statements that he made in that press conference with things like every teacher, which includes kindergarten classrooms or math classrooms, are going to have a Bible and teach from the Bible, is probably a little bit of talking a big game. And a little bit of trying to score some political points from his allies who might like the idea of every public school classroom in Oklahoma having to have basically Christian religious instruction. But then when he was actually going to create new rules, stuck with something that is hewing much closer to what the Constitution allows.
And speaking of the Constitution, Emma, we've only got about a minute left. But he says the separation of church and state appears nowhere in the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution. That's just blatantly wrong, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure what he thinks the Establishment Clause is doing then. Right, it's very explicit. Yeah.
I mean, the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So you just don't do that. And then the 14th Amendment takes it one step further and says, hey, it's applicable to the states as well. So I guess I'm glad that you're agreeing with me on the constitutional analysis here, and I suppose that his directive here may very well be challenged.
Well, we'll see. He seems very confident that it would survive constitutional muster. But I think it remains to be seen what the additional requirements he'll place on teachers are, what the more specific requirements are. And then I think we'll get a much better picture of, whether this is just an attempt to score some political points without really changing anything about what happens in Oklahoma schools, or a real attack on religious freedom.
Brilliant. Emma Camp, Assistant Editor at Reason, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll be following that one again very closely. Stay with us on that. And stay with us after the break. We'll be back to talk about President Biden.
.30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomis. KSL's top story this hour. After 2 people were killed in a crash in Ogden Canyon on Saturday, there are calls now on social media for better safety on the Canyon Road. The accident occurred when a bulldozer fell off a trailer and onto an oncoming vehicle. Corporal Justin Cloward, who works with motor carriers for the Utah Highway Patrol, says drivers not only have to have a 4-point secure tie-down, but also have to account for the weight distribution of their loads.
And that's usually where we see the deficiency, is the way that it is hooked to the machine.
Unfortunately, Cloward says it's not common for large loads to have security issues, but he says debris on roadways from unsecured loads incites more calls than any other issue. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. As any Democrats who don't think President Biden should continue his campaign are welcome to challenge him at the party's national convention. That's what Biden told the MSNBC program Morning Joe, that elites were wrong about his chances to beat Donald Trump in 2020, and they're wrong now. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down on the day 41 points, while the NASDAQ is up 15 points. And our KSL weather, nothing but hot in the forecast. That's next. KSL News Time 1:32.
Here's a way to get breaking news updates anywhere you go.
At the store or in a work meeting, you can get breaking news on your phone.
You can quickly read it, swipe, or click for more. It's super discreet, super fast.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
The life of a small business owner. Keeping the lights on, calling all the shots. And then there's workplace accidents. 500-degree ovens, rusty nails. Danger lurks around every corner. Workplace accidents can happen, but there is an easy way to keep your employees covered. Talk to your agent about workers' comp coverage from Pi, or go to piinsurance.com and get a quote. Safety first, then Pi Insurance. Individual rates, offerings, and savings may vary, subject to policy terms and conditions. Not available in all states and situations.
911, what's your emergency? Someone on the other line said they kidnapped my son.
On September 12, 1995, McKay Everett disappeared from his home in Conroe, Texas.
There was no sign of forced entry. It was just as if McKay had walked out of his own free will.
And to this day, McKay's mother, Paulette, feels that justice was never truly served. Ransom is available now. Listen at ransompodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
I juggle a lot. And managing constipation with belly pain from my irritable bowel syndrome with constipation, or IBS-C, with laxatives and fiber isn't enough. My doctor recommended a way to get ahead of it. Then I said yes to Linzess.
Linzess linaclotide is a prescription medicine that treats IBS-C in adults. It's not a laxative. It's a once-daily pill that helps you get ahead of your symptoms. It's proven to help you have more frequent and complete bowel movements and helps relieve overall abdominal symptoms, belly pain, discomfort, and bloating. These symptoms were studied in combination, not individually. Do not give Linzess to children less than 2. It may harm them. Do not take Linzess if you have a bowel blockage. Get immediate help if you develop unusual or severe stomach pain, especially with bloody or black stools. The most common side effect is diarrhea, sometimes severe. If it's severe, stop taking Linzess and call your doctor right away. Other side effects include gas, stomach area pain, and swelling. Talk to your doctor and learn more at linzess.com or call 1-800-LINZESS.
You've been working so hard to keep your lawn and garden looking good. Maybe it's time to make your home look incredible with new window frames and double-pane glass from Advanced Window Products. If you can imagine it, they can create it at their factory in Salt Lake City. Any style, any color, security enhancements to keep your family safe. All this and factory direct pricing. You're buying local and paying less. So seal up your home and reap the energy savings with Advanced Window Products, where they've been creating windows for 38 years. No subcontractors, they're not resellers. They build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. And right now at their summer special, get an extra $2,500 off on 10 windows or more. They offer 0% financing and even buy now, pay later. Busy season's just hitting. Call now. Advanced Window Products, $2,500 off. But you have to call 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100. Or go to advancedwindowsusa.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
We had some unusual slowdowns northbound on I-15 between 33rd South and the 6th South exit downtown. That's starting to break up and thin out, and speeds are improving, but we're not completely clear of the delay. And a report of debris tires in the road, tire treads, southbound I-15 prior to 5th South. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Look for sunny skies with a high of 94 today. Then we get into a stretch of very hot weather with highs up to 105 for 3 days later this week. And right now, 90 degrees with sunny skies. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
And we're back on Inside Sources. I'm Greg Skordas filling in this afternoon for Boyd Matheson. And it seems like we just got through, I think, July 1st, a week ago today. We received the last of several opinions from the United States Supreme Court, and I think some that we were really waiting for, the one that most people were waiting for was the Trump immunity decision, which came out very, very last, and that was a confusing one for a lot of people, but it generally gave the president, not necessarily Trump, because it wasn't necessarily related to him, a broad level of prosecutorial immunity for acts that they commit that could be determined to be criminal while they're serving in office. And I don't want to dig into the weeds of that because that's yesterday's news. We also had this Chevron doctrine, which allowed that administrative agencies had tremendous discretion in enacting regulation and law. That doctrine had been in place for 40 years. That no longer exists, and our administrative agencies are going to be on the brink now as to trying to decide what they can do, what they can still do. We had the Idaho near abortion ban put on hold, at least for the time being, while the 9th district, that's the one in California that includes Idaho, decides what that's all about, and a Second Amendment case regarding whether or not people that were subject to protective orders could legally be restricted from possessing a firearm, and the Supreme Court said yes. The Supreme Court, as it prepares for its next term, we're sort of looking at some issues that are on the table. And of course, the Supreme Court, you think any time a case is important, it's going to end up at the Supreme Court. That's not the case. They grant what's called certiorari, which means that they're going to hear a case, and it can't get to them unless it's been heard by another lower court. For example, the Utah Supreme Court, if it deals with the Utah issue, or the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, if it deals with something in this district, which is a federal court. The Supreme Court can decide what cases they want to take up, what cases are interesting to them. And so we're looking ahead, and luckily we have with us Kelsey Dallas, who is a reporter with the Deseret News, covers religion, sports, and fortunately for us, the Supreme Court, who's going to talk to us about some of the cases that we may be looking forward to. And Kelsey, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
And I was looking at some of these, and maybe you can help break it down a little bit, but maybe I'll just let you start. Gender-related health care for minors. Can you tell us about that one?
Yes, that's, I would say, the biggest case the Supreme Court has agreed to hear so far, one that's going to be closely watched by policymakers across the country, as well as regular people who are affected by this question of what types of gender-related treatments their children have access to. So the Supreme Court case focuses on a Tennessee law that actually looks quite a bit like Utah's law on gender-related health care. Tennessee was trying to prevent children and teens under the age of 18 from getting hormone therapy, blockers, or gender transition surgeries, and it was specifically targeted at transgender young people. And the question of the Supreme Court case is, are you allowed to block those treatments, including hormone therapy, for transgender young people if you allow other young people to get the same treatments, like someone who might need hormone therapy for a different reason because they have some other disease or disorder where they need help going through puberty. And so the Supreme Court has been asked to consider whether that law unfairly targets members of the transgender community and whether it can remain in place.
So that one seems to be, Kelsey, an equal protection argument. That is to say that kids with certain conditions are not treated the same as kids with others, right?
Exactly, the 14th Amendment. And it's notable because, as I noted, several states have similar policies on the books. And this debate about transgender-related health care for young people is so big right now. Even in other countries, there are policymakers trying to figure out what the right thing to do is.
Your dog is demanding your attention, Kelsey. But stay with us for a few moments. No. I got the same problem at my house. So that one actually, and I hate to stay on this same issue, is quite similar to, like you said, a law that Utah has passed. And you're telling me that this is a case that the Supreme Court has decided to take up. They are hearing this, so that could have huge impact on Utah.
Yes, so that'll be sometime this fall, most likely, that we'll have oral arguments. But the story that I did was looking at which cases they've agreed to hear. They're at 28 or 30 right now, and they'll eventually get to probably 75 or 80 heard during the term.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about one. I've been reading your article about it, but I guess I'm not 100% sure what a ghost gun is.
Oh, sure. That is another big case, especially as you noted on the heels of a ruling about Second Amendment rights for people under a domestic violence restraining order. A ghost gun is a gun that someone can put together at home because they've ordered a gun parts kit for delivery. And so the question is, can you regulate the purchase of gun parts kits the same as you would regulate firearms? Can you require companies that sell them to run background checks, for example? And this has a lot to do with the case that you didn't mention about guns from this term that was on bump stocks. So another way that you could adjust a gun that you owned. And in that case, they were saying whether a bump stock amounts to a shotgun, a machine gun, I think, in the law. And here they're saying is something you build yourself, a firearm as defined by pre-existing firearm policies. And so it'll be really interesting if the Supreme Court continues with the same theme of no, administrations can't put new gun policies in place using old policies because the definitions don't apply.
And I think that's an issue that's been challenged or at least been looked at a little bit because when is a gun not a gun? And if you're just replacing, let's say, the barrel or the stock or some magazine in your gun, you're not really purchasing a gun. But if you're purchasing all of those things together and you put it together and there you've got a gun, we're trying to decide, hey, you still need to go through the same background check and the same sort of compliance that anyone would have if they went and purchased the gun already put together.
Yeah, I would think they would approach this a little bit differently than the bump stock one, because in the bump stock case, they had to ask whether an accessory that makes it easier to shoot a weapon more quickly is the same thing as having an automatic weapon, and they sort of got caught up in the language of the policy. And here, I think it's a slightly different question where it's like, okay, if you buy something that allows you to build a gun, is that the same thing as buying a gun? So, right. I mean, it's a difficult question, and it's a question that matters quite a bit in our country's overall debate about gun control. But it's also just a really interesting logic question for those of us who follow the legal issues closely.
Kelsey, I yacked too long, and I'm cutting you off a little bit here, but I've got about a minute, a little bit less. Talk to us about the age verification on pornography sites, because that's another one that is very similar to a Utah law, I think.
Yes, this is interesting, although when you hear oral arguments in this case, it won't actually talk about why you would want age verification or how the age verification works. It's actually going to be focused on how the lower courts debated the question and whether they used the right legal test, as it's called. But basically, this arose in Texas, I believe, about requiring users of websites with sensitive material, most notably like pornography websites, requiring users to input their age. And some adult users challenged it and said that they don't like this restriction on the website. And so then the court was asked to say whether the policy could stay in place, and the Supreme Court is going to consider whether the court, rather than the lawmakers, applied the right test.
And I want to ask you one follow-up question, Kelsey. Is there a case that you're really looking at? Is there one of these cases, maybe not one that we've talked about here, that you can say, this is one we ought to take a close look at, even though we're a year in advance?
Well, I'm still waiting because I generally follow religion-related Supreme Court cases. And in my article, I noted that there was no First Amendment religious freedom case in the recently concluded term, and there is not one taken up yet for the 2024-25 term. And so I'm sort of hungry for news related to religious freedom battles, and we'll just have to wait and see if one pops up.
Yeah, interesting. Well, thank you so much. You sound like you've got a lot of law training because you knew these cases better than I did, and I profess to be a lawyer. That was Kelsey Dallas from the Deseret News. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And when we come back after the break, let's talk about gambling and how the internet has affected that. Stay with us.
After 20 years of music in the mountains, concertgoers from all across our state and beyond have made some amazing memories at Utah Symphony's Deer Valley Music Festival, and we're inviting you to join us again this summer. Don't miss crowd favorites, patriotic pops, Disney in concert, Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture, and the music of John Williams. Pack your picnics, bring your family and friends, and get ready for memorable summer evenings with the Utah Symphony, July 5th through August 9th in Park City. Tickets are on sale now at DeerValleyMusicFestival.org. The Utah Symphony's Deer Valley Music Festival showcases talented vocalists performing your favorite chart-topping songs with the full power of the symphony. You'll wish your recordings at home offered the same orchestration. Don't miss the music of Whitney Houston, the trailblazing music of Joni Mitchell, Carole King, and Carly Simon, Hamilton's Leslie Odom Jr., and Cody Fry, all with the Utah Symphony. July 5th through August 9th in Park City. Tickets are on sale now at deervalleymusicfestival.org.
You trust us for news and information in your car. Now trust us at home. KSL News Radio has you covered, keeping you informed on the latest breaking news, weather, traffic, sports, and more. Listen on your Amazon Echo or Google Home device. Just say, Alexa, open KSL News Radio. Or listen on the KSL News Radio Listen app. Text the word app to 57500. KSL News Radio. We have you covered.
You wouldn't know it, but most financial advisors are put in a box. I'm Jeff Jr. from Trajan Wealth, and I want to provide you a little insight about financial advisors. Most financial advisors have to sell what their company requires them to sell, and many advisors have to only adhere to what's called a suitability standard. A suitability standard is a limited standard of care, not requiring what's sold to be best just suitable. Advisors with this loose standard often have limited investment and product selection. Trajan Wealth is held to a fiduciary standard, which is the highest standard of care in the advisory business. And that's just one of the many reasons we have billions of dollars under our care and attract clients from other advisors. Raise your standards today and call Trajan Wealth. Call 801-899-7600. That's 801-899-7600.
Advisory services offered through Trajan Wealth, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor.
Any Hour Services can make sure your AC keeps you cool this summer. Whether you need a tune-up, repair, or just a second opinion about replacing it, call Any Hour Services or visit anyhourservices.com.
Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Our goal every day on Inside Sources is to help you divide the rage from the reason, elevate the conversation, connect the dots, and make the news make sense in your world. We have conversations with great thinkers, with great leaders, and great people who are just out there making a difference in the world. Now, we do talk about politics, but only so we can discuss society and culture. And then we explore society and culture so we can discuss principles and the people in America and the state of Utah who actually live them and apply them every day. We bring the best and brightest minds to the state of Utah, and we love to take the Utah model and send it out to our nation's capital and beyond. Every day on Inside Sources, you'll be part of that conversation. To help you understand things in a different way, we'll get you to think again about what you think you know, but most important, we're going to help you have confidence to have crucial conversations in your community and in your own home.
Join Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson, 1 to 3 on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, a fatal accident in Ogden Canyon has some questioning the safety of large loads on narrow Utah highways. Second, President Biden says any Democrat who doesn't think he should stay in the race can challenge him at the party convention. And third, Utah's Olympic watch party set for July 24th in the middle of the night. 90 degrees and sunny right now in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources. My name is Greg Skordas. I'm filling in this afternoon for Boyd Matheson. And a lot of you know that I have practiced law for 40-some years. Part of that time, I was at the district attorney's office in Salt Lake County, and I was charged with overseeing gambling offenses. And this was a while ago, but there was always this really weird line that we had to consider as to whether or not something was gambling or whether it wasn't. And so, for example, the bingo parlor down the street, is that gambling or not? Well, I guess it depends. If you get something of value, you put up money and you get something back. And technically, it is, but what are we going to do about it? And technically, we decided we weren't going to do anything about it. If you go to the raffle at your kid's school and you pay $1 to spin the wheel and you can win something, is that gambling? Of course it is. Do we enforce that? Absolutely not. I'm not saying that we should continue these enterprises. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm just saying we cross the line into gambling far more than you realize, and the law is something that's sort of ever evolving. We are talking now about what's happening at Dave & Buster's. If you recall, if you've been to Dave & Buster's, you can play their games there, and they're converting those into what they call real money contests. In other words, well, I guess our guest can help us with this. There may be a way that you can get money from that. And before I before I break it down any further, let's get to the source of the information. This is Christine Emba, staff writer at The Atlantic. Christine, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Can you hear me, Christine?
I can. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Can you tell us what's going on at Dave & Buster's, what they're doing, and why this is interesting?
Yeah, it is very interesting and a little bit alarming. So as you explained quite perfectly, Dave & Buster's is, what is usually understood to be kind of a family and friends destination for playing arcade games and watching sports. Things like a milk jug toss or hot shots, basketball or skee ball, things like that. Dave & Buster's announced in May, at the end of May, quietly, that they were teaming up with a tech company, Lucra, to gamify some of their arcade games and, as you said, turn them into real money contests for their customers, meaning that customers using the Dave & Buster's app, which you can put sort of your arcade tokens on, will be able to use the app to place bets ostensibly with their friends on different games, $10 on who wins at Hot Shots, $5 on who wins at pinball, things like that. And I was fascinated by this. It was announced by, just another fun way to make the Dave & Buster's experiment more exciting. But why do you need to gamble on kids' games at, a lottery or at a family restaurant? And I think that it symbolizes what I've been noticing for a long time, a sort of what I term vice creep, the entry into normal life of all of these things that we used to look with something of a skeptical eye upon, whether it's gambling or pornography or drug use. This just seemed like a particularly egregious example.
Yeah, and Christine, I'm looking at some of the information you posted on this, and I mean, I think that the problem we've had is that we've allowed groups like Dave & Buster's and others to get close to that line, and now they're seemingly just taking an additional step and saying, okay, it's one thing to get a stuffed doll or a Mickey Mouse pin or something like that. Let's add money to the equation, and let's even make it sort of contest between customers. That seems to be what they're doing here, right?
Right, exactly. And this is of a piece with a development that we're seeing across the country. So in 2018, kind of unbeknownst or unnoticed by a lot of people, the Supreme Court decided in a case called Murphy versus National College Athletic Association, Murphy versus NCAA, that invalidated what was known as the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act. And basically that act had made it illegal to bet on non-professional and professional sports. Once that was overturned, once that was legalized in 2018, suddenly companies basically expanded to push sports betting between friends over apps and on the internet in almost as many states as possible, as fast as possible. It became widely profitable. And so that's why you're suddenly seeing ads for FanDuel and DraftKings everywhere. You can't watch a game without being encouraged to place a parlay online or practice trying out your first bet. Even when you walk into a sports stadium, often you're pushed a bet push notification on your phone. And because that happened so quickly, it's basically unregulated. And Dave & Buster's views itself as a place where one could go watch sports, but also play sports and experience the action, and including sports betting on both the sports that you're watching on the screen, but also the games that you're playing with the people you go with people in person, is apparently to them just another way to become more profitable, to get people to stay longer and spend more money.
And I'm just, what I know about Dave & Buster's, they seem to have outlets everywhere, but they're going to run into, I think, Christine, the fact that they've got 50 states that have rules and regulations about gambling. And, for example, Utah and Nevada, we share a border, but we share no common definition of gambling, or at least of legal gambling. I mean, how does Dave & Buster's if they've even talked about this, pretend to go into each of their jurisdictions, each of their states, and regulate what they're doing?
Well, so it's exactly what you said at first. They don't call it gambling, although, of course, that's what it is when you place money on a game. Instead, they term it real money contests or a skill-based game. So in the legal understanding, gambling is technically when you are placing money or something of value on an uncertain outcome, something that you have no control over. So like roulette, for instance, there's no skill involved. You just get what you get. Dave & Buster's and its partner, Lucra, are trying to kind of get around this understanding of gambling by saying that, well, these are skill-based games, actually, that people are playing. So they're not really gambling because, they're contests, using their real money contests or some other terminology that kind of skirts the issue. Of course, the thing is, regulators will probably catch up, but they're hoping that they can have a foothold in time. And that is what's happened with online sports betting. All of these companies sort of raced to enter the market before regulators had kind of caught up and realized that there were different ways to talk about and codify gambling. And now they're so entrenched that it's hard to do anything about them.
Yeah, in Utah, we call it, it's gambling if there is an element of chance. So it could be skill-based in some part, but there's still some chance involved. For example, a card game, you may be a better poker player than your friend, but there's still an element of chance as to what cards are dealt you. And I suppose Dave & Buster's is trying to overcome this. We've only got about 30 seconds left. But can you tell us, Christine, if we've heard any challenges to this yet?
A few legislators have raised concerns, but we haven't heard any major challenges yet. I think the biggest challenge Dave & Buster's has seen, actually, was pushback from their viewing audience, from writers like myself and other people who observe this idea and were like, wait, this is for children.
Right.
Do we really need to be introducing gambling everywhere in our society? And I think that's a valid question to ask, and I'm hoping that that's one question that this development raises more and more often.
Right. Thank you for joining us. That was really interesting. Christine Emba. When we come back after the break, we're going to be talking more about President Biden and whether or not he's staying in the presidential race. That is a question that changes by the minute. Stay with us.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, we're counting down 16 days until the historic announcement, Salt Lake City 2034.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. With the state eagerly awaiting the official nod to host the 2034 Olympic Winter Games, Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall extended an invitation to all Utahns to join the Olympic Bid Watch Party on Pioneer Day.
On the steps of the Salt Lake County building, Bid Committee Board Chair Catherine Norman called the late-night party
the best pajama party ever, right?
Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall will be in Paris at the International Olympic Committee meeting, but said she can't wait to see the crowd reaction back home if they make it official.
And we're going to party like it's 2002 right here at Washington Square.
The final presentation to see if Utah officially gets the green light starts at 3 a.m. local time on big screens with food trucks and caffeine to keep the crowd awake. Eric Cabrera, KSL News Radio.
Our top national story this hour from ABC News. At least 31 people were killed in an attack on a children's hospital in the capital of Ukraine. Heavy equipment was being used to lift debris. Workers searched for more victims in the rubble. Ukraine says it intercepted 30 Russian missiles fired at 5 different cities. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down on the day 31 points, while the NASDAQ was up about 51. And our KSL weather looks like nothing but hot weather ahead in the up to 105, actually. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:01.
News doesn't just mean information or dates.
It's the story of our local history being told in real time.
Be a part of the story. This is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
We hope to be a part of your story. We have you covered on KSL News Radio.
When you're getting a new roof installed, you don't want to wonder, when are they going to be done? Or even worse, What are they doing up there? You'll never have to ask when you hire IWC Roofing, because their team of certified installers will be texting you pictures from the roof. You're going to know exactly what's going on and what you're getting for your money. And on most homes, they'll do the entire job in one day. In, out, cleaned up, and they'll even power wash your driveway just to say thank you. Now, you think you'd pay a premium for this level of service, but IWC does so many roofs. They get the material for less, and they pass the savings on to you. IWC is an Owens Corning certified platinum contractor. Of course, financing is available. Even better, their summer special, up to $2,000 off your quote. But you have to make the call. $2,000 off right now. Call IWC Roofing, 801-232-5690. That's 801-232-5690. Or go to IWCRoofingUtah.com.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Grainger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Get in the zone, AutoZone.
Welcome to AutoZone. What are you working on today? Well, you've got an oil change coming up. You can go farther and save on full synthetic with our oil change special. Right now, you can get 5 quarts of STP full synthetic oil with an STP extended life oil filter for just $29.99. Get the parts you need when you need them at AutoZone or AutoZone.com.
Get in the zone, AutoZone.
Restrictions apply.
We have emergency traffic right now, brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
I don't have an accident reported or any other kind of traffic issue, at least not yet, but northbound I-15 has come to a crawl. It looks like whatever is causing the problem, and it could be construction, is just as you're passing 5600 South Roy, going from Davis into Weber County, but we have solid delays, and these are slow and go speeds into Clearfield. Also, a crash called out in South Salt Lake at State Street, just south of 3500 South. Get triple reward points on your Rewards Visa card from Cyprus Credit Union when you spend on gas and travel from now through August. Learn more or apply today at cypruscu.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Our weather will be sunny with a high of 94 today. Then we get into a stretch of very hot weather with highs up to 105 later this week. And right now we're looking at 90 degrees with sunny skies. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
You're back with us for the second hour of Inside Sources. My name is Greg Skordas, filling in today for Boyd Matheson. And one of the nice things about sitting in this studio is that you've got all these TV cameras in front of you, and it never changes, at least for the last few weeks. Half of the stations are still reporting, is Biden still committed to the race? Is Joe Biden going to run? Is he still in? Is he seemingly getting out? And that right now, he seems to be saying all the right things in terms of staying in. But let's talk to a congressional reporter covering the House of Representatives for the Washington Post. I'm talking about Mariana Sotomayor, who is covering this and knows more about it than I ever will. Mariana, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me on.
So over the weekend, the president sat down with George Stephanopoulos on ABC and said, I'm in. There has to be some chink in this armor. There has to be something where because people are still pushing him to get out. What can you tell us about what's happening?
Yes, there are still many conversations across the Democratic Party because there are legitimate concerns about the president's well-being. And listen, a lot of House Democrats who I've talked to are very much willing to have a conversation. That's something that we should expect as members of Congress from throughout the country actually descend back into Washington today. These conversations are going to be ongoing both on the House and Senate floor, as well as in these party meetings and luncheons over the next couple of days. And, we have actually heard from many more members who are now going public in defense of Biden and also telling their colleagues, hey, the president is saying that he is going to stay into this race for as long as he can. A lot of these members also saying, he can still beat Trump. However, there is still a lot of private concerns. There's not been that many members who have come out and said that Biden should step aside, but there are many more members who are still privately thinking and talking about that in these conversations because they don't know if Biden can beat Trump anymore. A lot of members waiting on polling, also looking at their own internal polls about whether Biden can actually beat Trump. And there's also legitimate concerns about whether he would have another debate-like moment, in a couple weeks, in a couple months, if he does beat Trump, in a couple years as president.
Yeah, and in that regard, Mariana, do we have any notion that Biden is wavering, or is he talking to people who might be trying to push him one way or the other? I mean, I'm watching Jill Biden on the TV screen just touting and just rolling with the Biden campaign like we're in with both feet, we're doing everything. Some people think maybe he's just saying the right things at this point.
Yeah, I actually covered Biden on a daily basis when he was the presidential candidate in 2020. And if there's one thing that I remember from aides and those who have been close to him for years is that he is a very stubborn man, and that when he sticks to an idea, it is extremely hard to waver him off of that. So that is a little bit of what we're seeing here. You point to Jill Biden, who is also probably the most important surrogate here. The family does play an important role in reassuring Biden. And I think one thing that many House Democrats and also Senate Democrats privately what they've said when they watched the interview with ABC News last week and over the weekend, Biden was incredibly defiant. And what he said was, I haven't heard any concerns from Capitol Hill from members saying that I should step aside, even though there are members saying that publicly, and of course many others privately airing those grievances through the press, which the president made note to dismiss in that interview. So it really has made many more Democrats weigh, and this is not just lawmakers, this is donors, this is potential delegates to the Democratic National Convention next month. They are weighing at this current moment whether to go public with their frustrations.
Mariana, we know you're short on time, so thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
And it's interesting that she mentions the ABC interview with George Stephanopoulos, because over the weekend, the president did sit down with him for an interview, discuss his future in the race. Stephanopoulos asked Biden what he would do if a majority of the Democrats in Congress called for him to step down. And here's how he responded.
We're not going to do that.
You sure?
Well, yeah, sure. Look, I mean, if the Lord Almighty came down and said, Joe, get out of the race, I get out of the race, the Lord Almighty's not coming down. I mean, these hypotheticals, George,
But it's not that hypothetical anymore.
And it continued between the two, and George asked the president how he would feel if Donald Trump wins in November. Is he going to feel any guilt?
And if you stay in and Trump is elected and everything you're warning about comes to pass, how will you feel in January?
I feel as long as I gave it my all and I did the goodest job as I know I can do. That's what this is about.
And I don't think that the president can get away with that. I mean, I really feel like if Trump wins in November and Biden is the opponent, that people will forever blame Biden. They will forever blame him for staying in the race when it was not his to win. I don't know that it is or it isn't. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that this is one of those situations where if it's a Biden-Trump ticket, or contest in November and Trump wins, people will remember Biden as the person who didn't get out when the getting was good. And I know that the Democrats are struggling a little bit in terms of, well, if it's not Biden, then who? I've seen the ads, I've seen the pundits, I've seen the jokes and the quips about, is it Kamala Harris? Is it going to be Pete Buttigieg? Is it Cory Booker? Is it Gavin Newsom, the governor of California? I mean, a lot of names are being brought out, and I think a lot of names, there've got to be some polling going on with voters saying, okay, so if it's Trump versus Buttigieg, who would you vote for? If it's Trump versus Kamala Harris, who do you vote for? And to see which of those names strikes the most votes, because right now it appears that the president is losing in the key states that are going to make a difference in this, and that's probably not going to change. I think a lot of us naively, myself included, felt like Trump was going to be doomed if he was convicted of a felony. And he gets convicted of 34 felonies in the state of New York. What happens to his numbers? Not much of a shift. I mean, a couple of points down, and he's starting to raise money again. But then the debate comes forward, and this was just, I don't know, 2 weeks ago? And Biden stumbles in a way that has hurt him more than 34 felonies did to Donald Trump. I mean, it's just the way it is. And 34 felonies didn't cause Republicans to come forward and say, hey, Trump, you need to get out of this. You're not going to win. In fact, I think people rallied behind him. Biden didn't get the same love. And people within his own party are saying, you need to get out. And I think there's some concern about his health. I think there's some concern about his wherewithal, whether or not he is in a position to finish this term, whether he's going to be able to stay strong and resilient between now and January when the next president takes office, whether it's him or someone else. It's not like he's getting better. It's not like his mindset is going to get stronger after the next couple months, and especially after the next 4 years. I think people are very within their right to feel concerned about both of the candidates who are currently the front runners for president. But Biden seems to be taking a little bit more of a hard hit than Trump. When we come back after the break, we are talking about the Utah signature gathering process. And we started the show talking about an issue involving the 2nd Congressional District and how that was going out. There's another one that involves the signature gathering process in general. And this is a lawsuit that I want to talk about after the break that I've been reading over, styled Phil Lyman versus Deidre Henderson and others, a lawsuit that was filed just a few days ago regarding the signature gathering process and whether that was done legally, effectively, or not. We'll dive deep into that after the break. Stay with us.
Just 2 weeks left before the historic announcement.
Tim is going to Paris. He'll be live for us on KSL all that week.
Get special coverage on the final preparations and decision for Salt Lake City 2034. Listen at 7:30, 8:30, and 10:30 in the morning this week on KSL News Radio.
This Friday, join KSL News Radio and NPS from 10 to 1 as the movie show stops by. Then, browse and uncover what makes NPS so great. With 4 locations, NPS takes a new inventory every day. Then, they check all competitors' retail pricing before marking items down 20 to 70% off. You're invited to visit the movie show this Friday from 10 to 1. And that's the first step to discovering NPS. Visit npsstore.com to begin your own NPS adventure. npsstore.com.
Emergency traffic on KSL News Radio, brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. We have heavy delays on northbound I-15 going between Davis and Weber counties. Now, the crawl on the drive will start as you're approaching 650 North in Clearfield. You will not be clear of the slowdowns until you're passing 5600 South Roy and on the way to Riverdale Road. The odd thing about these delays, I don't have a crash reported or any other trouble in traffic. This could be construction, but right now you need to add another 20 to 25 minutes minimum to your travel time going between Davis and Weber counties on northbound I-15. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Feeling the heat at home in places your air conditioning can't reach? You might be overlooking a common culprit, your attic ventilation. Poor attic ventilation can spike your energy bills and shorten your roof's lifespan. Don't sweat it out this summer. Master Roofing is here to help. This July, Master Roofing is offering a free attic ventilation inspection and 20% off all attic ventilation services. Certified inspectors are ready to optimize your home's comfort and efficiency. Call 801-383-0072 or visit masterroofingutah.com to schedule your free inspection today.
Hi, this is Doug Wright, the other night, D and I. On opening night, by the way, we had the chance to see The Nutty Professor, which is playing right now at Hale Center Theater. By the way, it continues on through August 17th. This was so much fun. For those of us who love the old Jerry Lewis movie, boy, it has ties to that. And the music of Marvin Hamlish is incredible. And the way it's staged at Hale Center Theater is simply a delight. Do not miss your chance to see The Nutty Professor. It's on the stage right now. And of course, The Time Machine is also showing. That will continue through July 20th. And it too is so wonderful. There is always something amazing awaiting you on the stages at Hale Center Theater. The Addams Family coming up in August. We've got The Magician's Elephant. And of course, the classic Beauty and the Beast. Get your tickets now. Simply go to hct.org. And by the way, for current season ticket holders, it's time to renew now at Hale Center Theater.
My wife and I always loved doing everything together. Jiu-jitsu, kayaking, and intimacy was always on point. It was around my early 30s when I noticed a downward trend. Watching a lot of TV, putting on weight, and just full of self-doubt. I had tried another men's clinic with disappointing results. It's the personalized treatment I receive at Revive Men's Health that has been the complete game changer for me. I've got my energy and motivation back, I'm feeling stronger than I did in my 20s, and it made me a much better husband to my wife.
I'm Eric Ramos, healthcare provider at Revive Men's Health. If you are always feeling tired or moody, have a difficult time sleeping, or decreased libido, you may be suffering from low testosterone.
Book your free T-check and exam at Revive Men's Health, Salt Lake City. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
Boyd Matheson. Listening to Inside Sources is a little different from just reading the headlines because we're always going to get you into that think again moment. We have experts from around the country, across the world, and right here local to home that'll help us dive in and get past just the hype, the fluff, the fake fights, and the false choice so we can get into the news to help you connect the dots and make the news make sense.
Join Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson, 1 to 3 on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Salt Lake City's watch party for the Olympic Games announcement will start at 3 o'clock in the morning on Pioneer Day. Second, a 10,000-acre wildfire has been threatening homes in southern Utah. Third, a Russian missile attack has killed at least 31 people at a children's hospital in Ukraine. 90 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
And you're with us on Inside Sources. My name is Greg Scorsese. I'm filling in for Boyd Matheson today. And when we started the show, we talked about a lawsuit that had been filed last Friday. Colby Jenkins versus Ryan Sullivan, who is the Washington County Clerk Auditor. And the purpose of that lawsuit was to get information about their voter list, about the people who had their mail-in votes questioned because the signatures may or may not have matched the signature that they put on their voter registration application. And there was a significant number of those votes that were still in question. That race has not formally been decided, but the lawsuit, at least to the extent that it asked for a writ of mandamus requiring the county clerk to produce those uncured ballots, was denied today. The trial court judge, the judge sitting in the 5th District Court, heard argument this morning at 9 o'clock, issued a ruling a couple of hours later, and denied Colby Jenkins' request for a writ of mandamus, which would have mandated the Washington County clerk to supply that information to the Colby Jenkins for Congress campaign. That lawsuit was filed Friday. At least an important part of it was decided today, world record time, 3 days. There was another lawsuit filed that I want to talk about. And if you recall, the gubernatorial race between Phil Lyman and our current governor, Spencer Cox, has been questioned in the following respect. There was obviously the Republican convention was some time ago. Phil Lyman got enough votes at the convention that he wouldn't have even had to sit for a primary because he got over the 60% threshold that was required by Utah state law. Spencer Cox didn't meet the 40% requirement, so under the old law, before we started gathering signatures, Spencer Cox wouldn't have been on the ballot for the primary 2 weeks ago. However, I think it was Senate Bill 54 or Senate Bill 54, which was enacted some time ago. It's now been in effect since 2014. It's 10 years down the road. Allows a second avenue for candidates to get on the primary ballot, and that is to gather signatures. And it's a little more complicated than that because the number of signatures that you have to gather is consistent with the type of race you're running. In other words, if you're running a statewide race, you have to gather 28,000 signatures, which represents some percentage of the state. If you're a congressional representative, like we talked about some others, then you're only representing a fourth of the state, so to speak. So you only need a fourth of 28,000, which by my math is 7,000 votes to get you into that rule, so you can be on the ballot for the primary election. Cox took the signature gathering. Lyman is relying in large part on the convention. Fast forward to today, we're almost 2 weeks down the road, and Lyman still hasn't surrendered. He hasn't acknowledged that Cox won. In fact, he's doubled down on his challenge and has filed a lawsuit in the 3rd Judicial District Court here in Salt Lake County. He lost the popular vote in the primary by some 9 or 10 points. I think it was 55 to 45 or 54 to 45 and a half. Anyway, Cox won by a significant amount, maybe not as much as some people thought, because I think people thought Cox would win that by more than just 10 points. But Lyman still hasn't conceded and, in fact, has filed this lawsuit. And let me just talk to you about the lawsuit a little bit. It's a lawsuit, according to Lyman, which is brought in the public's right to transparency and integrity of the signature gathering process for elections in Utah. So he talks about the history of the Senate Bill 54, the whole signature gathering process, and then talks about really what happened in this particular case. And he says this in his lawsuit. Historically, and this is correct, the Utah Republican Party has determined its candidates for election by the statewide nominating commission, which is the convention. At the convention, candidates receiving over 60% of the caucus votes are the official candidates. If no candidate gets 60%, then the top two proceed to the election. So in March of 2014, as I indicated, Senate Bill 54 is passed, which allows a second path to the election process, which is to the primary ballot, I should say, which is that the candidates can get a certain number of signatures, and if you get that number of signatures, you're on the ballot. The minimum number, as I said, for a statewide race is 28,000, and that's been in place for about 10 years. Lyman is quick to notice that it's been the subject of several lawsuits, several concerns. People are concerned. He brags about the fact that he got 67% at the convention, which means he should have already been on the ballot. He didn't submit signatures. Cox got 32% at the convention and had to comply with the law that requires signatures, and he was required to get 28,000 signatures. The lawsuit says this, and this is really interesting. According to the Lieutenant Governor's office, the Cox-Henderson campaign obtained 28,006 verified signatures, allegedly meeting the minimum threshold by 6 signatures. Now, that's a scary number, but that is verified signatures. In other words, they probably got many, many more than that, but having gone through the vetting process, the verification process, having looked at some of these signatures, I'm sure a large number of them were thrown out, and Cox still crossed the 28,000 threshold. Lyman then talks about another person who's running for office, who had run, a guy named Don Ibsen, who was also being challenged in that particular area of Washington County, and he challenged the vote process. And when he went through that, the signature process, I should say, the auditor determined that 600 votes were invalid, and so 600 of his signatures, I should say. I'm getting this wrong. Ibsen went the signature process. His signatures, 600 of those were invalid. He didn't cross the 2,000 threshold that he needed, and he couldn't be on the ballot. They're saying if that number of votes are wrong in Washington County, we need to look at Washington County, and that's why I believe the Lyman campaign has focused its lawsuit solely on Washington County, because they also mentioned that they sent a similar request to Salt Lake County, and Salt Lake said, yeah, here, you have what you want. But Washington County's been a little more circumspect. So we're looking at this now and sort of looking at whether or not the elections office, the director of elections, Ryan Cowley, the grandma request people are really doing their job when Lyman's people are trying to gather these signatures and trying to find out what's going on. And they're really critical of a group that was used, that was hired by several campaigns, including Derek Brown, who is currently the candidate for Attorney General, Brad Wilson, who lost in the Senate race because they used the same signature gathering group that Ibsen did. It's called Gathering Inc., and it was a group that has acknowledged that there were some errors in what they did. Their Gathering Inc. has said, look, we messed up on the Ibsen race because we had some signatures that were not necessarily within the county. We had to throw those out. But we still, if those hadn't been thrown out, we would have still had the requisite number of signatures. I hope that makes sense. So they're saying there's a difference here, but it wouldn't have made a difference in the Cox, Brown, Wilson campaigns. So the lieutenant governor's office has sort of recused themselves. The director of elections, who works for the lieutenant governors, they're saying should recuse himself. And the people that are dealing with the grandma requests really need to get this information to the Lyman people as soon as possible. He's asked for what's called declaratory relief, which means forcing the lieutenant governor and the agencies that have these signatures to disclose those, to make them available under grandma, and to make those available for his campaign to look at closely. He's not giving up, and he wants to see what he says are the unredacted signature packets and other information to allow him, Lyman, to independently evaluate, verify, or challenge the signatures allegedly supporting the Cox-Henderson, the Brad Wilson, and the Derek Brown campaigns. We'll see where that goes. That's not one that was decided today. That's one that's still in the courts, and we'll see where it goes. Interesting to get into that, and we'll see what Phil Lyman's up to next. Not giving up the race, challenging the process, and doing so by going through a court of law. Two lawsuits, different directions, but both challenging the election, which was just held. And by the way, we weren't challenging elections 10 years ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago. It seems to be the fad these days, and sad, but Utah's mail-in ballot process has really been a national model, but now it's under scrutiny by a number of candidates. When we come back after the break, we're going to talk to a guest about religion and polarization in America and how that's affected people's relationships with one another. Stay with us.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top local story this hour: the Silver King fire in Paiute County continues to grow today after it more than doubled in size yesterday. As of this morning, it was more than 10,000 acres, had 0% containment. Fire PIO Kevin Abel says hasn't yet damaged any buildings.
It's fairly close to some of the homes that are further up in the canyon. But we've got some amazing firefighters, both from local volunteer fire departments and structure departments, that are out there doing structure protection on those homes for that community.
And there are no mandatory evacuations on that fire right now. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Cities across California and the West are reporting record high temperatures. Redding in Northern California got to 119 degrees. Las Vegas reached 120. Palm Springs topped out at 124. St. George could come close to its record high of 117 later this week. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down on the day right now at the close of trading, 31 points, while the NASDAQ was up about 51. The S&P 500 was up 5. And our KSL weather, we'll get sunshine and as hot as Salt Lake City ever gets in the next few days. KSL News Time 2:32.
You know what's great about KSL's traffic coverage? Trained traffic reporters and real listeners.
Trading information and making the commute safer and faster for everyone.
Every 10 minutes on the 9s, we have you covered on KSL News Radio.
The life of a small business owner. Keeping the lights on, calling all the shots. And then there's workplace accidents. 500-degree ovens, rusty nails. Danger lurks around every corner. Workplace accidents can happen, but there is an easy way to keep your employees covered. Talk to your agent about workers' comp coverage from Pi, or go to piinsurance.com and get a quote. Safety first, then Pi Insurance. Individual rates, offerings, and savings may vary, subject to policy terms and conditions. Not available in all states and situations.
Ew, gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Tell me why.
Because it stinks, boys.
Tell me why.
I've washed it so many times, but the odor won't come out.
Tell me why.
No, you tell me why I can't get rid of this odor.
Have you tried Downy Rinse and Refresh? It doesn't just cover up odors, it helps remove them.
Wow, it worked, guys.
Yeah.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in one wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes. Find it wherever you buy laundry products.
I spray and scrub, but the soap scum in my bathtub is still there.
I spray and scrub, but the burnt sauce on my stovetop sticks around.
Sprays can leave grime behind, but new Mr. Clean Ultra Foamy Magic Eraser combines the scrubbing power of an eraser with the cleaning power of Dawn to melt away tough messes on contact.
Just wet, squeeze, and erase.
Stop spraying, start erasing, and clean with more magic than ever with new Ultra Foamy Magic Eraser.
Mr. Clean, Mr. Clean.
We have some exciting news to announce.
Master Electrical Service has joined Mountain Home Services.
And I can speak from experience, Deb. Mountain Home Services installed my furnace years ago, and it's been amazing.
And we know Master Electrical Service has been your trusted source for all your electrical needs, like your EV chargers, your generators, and recessed lighting.
But now that they've joined Mountain Home Services, they can help you with your HVAC, your heating and air, as well as your plumbing.
And it comes with that upfront pricing guarantee. I love the upfront pricing guarantee because it means no hidden fees.
100% satisfaction guarantee as well.
Master Electrical Service has been the name you trust since 1954.
They're the company we trust, and so can you.
Check them out now at mountainhomeutah.com.
That's mountainhomeutah.com, or give them a call at 801-543-2222. So easy to remember, 801-543-2222.
Emergency traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
I can finally see maybe what might be the problem. Northbound I-15 in Roy, we do have a UHP officer over to the right shoulder at 5600 South. Not sure if that's taking up a lane of travel. I can see at least 2 lanes open to get through that construction. But on northbound I-15, the delays are solid from 5600 South Roy all the way back to 650 North in Clearfield. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Weather will be sunny with a high of 94 today. Then we get into a stretch of very hot weather with highs up to 105 later this week. Salt Lake City's all-time high is 107. And right now we're at 91 degrees with sunshine. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
And you're with us again on Inside Sources. My name is Greg Skordas. I'm filling in today for Boyd Matheson. And it just occurs to me, looking at where we are in this country right now, that in an era of increasing political polarization, we've been hearing that an unexpected beacon of hope has emerged, and that is places of worship. Believe it or not, recent research suggests that religious congregations may serve as crucial meeting grounds where people of differing political views can interact, collaborate, and see each other's humanity beyond partisan labels. The unique role of faith communities offers a promising avenue for bridging the widening divides in our society. We're lucky to be joined this afternoon by Dr. Rebecca Glazier, political science professor at the School of Public Affairs at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, and the director of the Little Rock Congregation Study, a long-term community-based research project on religion and community engagement. She is also the author of Faith and Community, How Engagement Strengthens Members, Places of Worship, and Society. Dr. Glazier, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much. It's my joy to be here.
And talk to us, because certainly religion is a big deal in most all parts of the country, not the least of which is Utah. How is it that people are dealing with their political differences in this forum?
Yeah, it can be a really divisive place, and sometimes people really butt heads at their places of worship. But our data, and we've been working in the community for over a decade, shows that when you have ideologically diverse places of worship, and the key here is that at those places of worship, people are serving together and are engaged in the community. When those things happen, you actually have people who feel like their voice matters. They're less jaded. They're more engaged. That's better for democracy. And you have warmer communities right there in their place of worship. So that ideological diversity is actually a positive, because when people are serving together and engaging in their community, they're seeing each other as real people, and they're making those bonds that can cross those ideological differences.
Rebecca, talk us about your studies. Talk to us about what you found and where you went to get your information.
Yeah, my research team and I have been working in depth in the city of Little Rock in Arkansas for over a decade, since 2009. And so actually we have been working with thousands of members of congregations, surveying them over the years, and also interviewing and surveying congregation leaders. And what we found is that when congregations get engaged in the community, that it benefits everyone, and it benefits on three different levels. It benefits individual members. So the people who are attending those congregations, they feel happier, they're healthier, they feel spiritually more connected to God. And the congregations themselves, they have higher attendance, higher giving, people who are serving in the congregations, and they have that warmer feeling of my congregation is my family, my church is my home. And then also that aggregates up to help society as a whole, because people feel a stronger level of efficacy, like their voice really matters. So instead of feeling jaded and checking out of politics, they feel like they can make a difference in their community and they want to do something about it. They want to participate. So it helps everyone when our places of worship get engaged. And we've been working with everyone from evangelical megachurches to wards from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints right here in Little Rock, to small Black Protestant churches, to mosques and synagogues.
And we sort of hear, and maybe it's just rumor, that you mentioned the evangelicals have taken a very far right position in a lot of our politics. Not that necessarily plays into their polarization, but are we finding that different congregations are seeing things differently, or are you talking sort of more broad-based in terms of your studies?
Yeah, we did ask the survey respondents to our congregations about where they see themselves politically in terms of their ideological placement, but we also asked them about what issues in the community mattered to them, and we also asked them about what they were getting engaged in. And what we found is that there were differences. Some congregations are more liberal, some congregations are more conservative, some congregations are more likely to get engaged in the community. But what we found is that when they get engaged and when they serve, that's when you see those breakdown in those divisions, that engagement, especially across ideological lines and across denominational lines. When you go do a service project with a different congregation, maybe from a different part of the city, maybe even from a different socioeconomic background or a different racial background, that helps break down those divisions and builds a real strong sense of community that previously wasn't there before.
We're joined this afternoon by Dr. Rebecca Glazier. Dr. Glazier, are we finding that that these conversations, these discussions that you're talking about, are healthy within the churches themselves, and sort of a welcome part of that? Because we've historically thought, we want to keep that out of the conversation when we go to church.
Yeah, it really depends on what they're talking about, and it depends on the leadership. The leadership can play a huge role here because so many issues are politicized these days. So we asked people in our surveys about what issues are important to them, and then if they wanted their congregation to get involved on that issue, and then if they themselves would volunteer on it. And here we saw some really surprising findings. So a lot of people, for instance, said that crime was a really important issue, but they didn't really want their congregation to do something on crime. They didn't feel like it was the place for their church to get involved with crime. But what we saw that we were a little surprised by was that the number one issue that people wanted their congregation to get involved in was race relations. They thought that their place of worship really had the tools and the resources to handle an issue like race that can be so fraught and that a lot of people have a hard time talking about. But religion has kind of the tools with talking about forgiveness and healing and repentance to be able to handle an issue like race.
Yeah.
So it depends on the kind of issue.
Yeah. Talk to us just a little bit more about that one in particular, Dr. Glazier, race relations and religion's role in helping us sort of break down some of the barriers there.
Yeah, it's a huge issue, especially because I'm doing research here in Little Rock in the South, where it's a racially divided city and has a big history of that racial division. And what we found is that there are a lot of people who really are looking for guidance from their place of worship on the issue of race. So we've seen over the years that we've been doing this research an increasing importance from both the leaders and the members in saying this is really an issue that we need to do something about. And the leadership plays such an important role there because the members sometimes feel like we don't know how to handle this. We're afraid to talk about it. We're afraid to say the wrong thing. And they need some guidance. So our research team actually put together, with the guidance of talking with our local religious leaders on our clergy advisory board and doing interviews and work with national leaders on faith-based racial justice, we put together a packet of resources that's freely available on our project website for any congregation that wants to get involved in doing faith-based racial justice work, because so many clergy leaders were asking for that help because their members wanted their place of worship to lead on race conversations.
What a fascinating conversation. Dr. Glazier, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Dr. Glazier is a political science professor at the School of Public Affairs at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. That is a study I think we should all take a closer look at. When we come back after the break, stay with us. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
You've been working so hard to keep your lawn and garden looking good. Maybe it's time to make your home look incredible with new window frames and double pane glass from Advanced Window Products. If you can imagine it, they can create it at their factory in Salt Lake City. Any style, any color, security enhancements to keep your family safe. All this and factory direct pricing. You're buying local and paying less. So seal up your home and reap the energy savings with Advanced Window Products, where they've been creating windows for 38 years. No subcontractors, they're not resellers. They build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. And right now at their summer special, get an extra $2,500 off on 10 windows or more. They offer 0% financing and even buy now, pay later. Busy season's just hitting. Call now. Advanced Window Products, $2,500 off. But you have to call 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100. Or go to advancedwindowsusa.com.
Emergency traffic continues on KSL News Radio, brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app, where you can save up to 20 cents per gallon. It's northbound I-15 at a crawl as you go from just after 7th South Clearfield all the way to 5600 South in Roy, where we have UHP, and it looks like either UDOT or some construction crews over to the right. I can't tell if they're blocking a lane of traffic. It does not look like an accident, but it's going to take you a good 25, maybe 30 minutes to get through these delays. If this is your typical route home before the afternoon drive begins, plan an alternate route until these delays clear out. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Hey, Utah. When it comes to guiding the growth of our state, you buzzed in with your comments, and we listened to what you had to say. Your feedback on the future of Utah's housing, water, transportation, and open space will continue to help our leaders make important policy decisions, preserving and improving our high quality of life in meaningful ways for years to come. So, thanks for speaking up. Learn more about our state's future at guidingourgrowth.utah.gov.
911, what's your emergency?
Someone on the other line said they kidnapped my son.
On September 12, 1995, McKay Everett disappeared from his home in Conroe, Texas.
There was no sign of forced entry. It was just as if McKay had walked out of his own free will.
And to this day, McKay's mother, Paulette, feels that justice was never truly served. Ransom is available now. Listen at ransompodcast.com. or wherever you get your podcasts.
The best things in life, they come in twos. 2 scoops of ice cream, 2 tacos. And now for a limited time, get our best deal of the year. Buy any phone when you switch to Consumer Cellular and get 2 months of service free. That's right, the same fast, reliable nationwide coverage as Big Wireless, now with 2 months free. Proof the best things in life really do come in twos. Visit consumercellular.com or call 1-888-FREEDOM. Second and third month of monthly base service fee waived for new customers with the purchase of a phone and activation by July 31st, 2024. Taxes, fees, and third-party charges will apply. See website for additional details.
Hey, what are you doing up on the step stool?
About to clean these light fixtures. The whole family's coming over, and if there's even a speck of dust in the house, my abuela will find it.
Here, I got a Swiffer duster to help with that.
A Swiffer what?
A Swiffer duster. It has this cool extendable handle that reaches 6 feet to get high and low, with fluffy dusters that easily trap and lock dust.
So, no more step stool?
No more step stool.
Easily trap and lock dust from hard-to-reach places with the Swiffer duster. Love it or your money back.
Attention homeowners considering roof replacement in 2024. Light up your home this July with Master Roofing. Schedule your roof replacement by the end of July and receive a free Velux sun tunnel valued at $1,200. Perfect for brightening your bathrooms and hallways. Don't miss out. Visit masterroofingutah.com and schedule your free assessment and claim your free Velux sun tunnel. Call 801-383-0072 or visit masterroofingutah.com today. Light up your home with Master Roofing.
The life of a small business owner. Keeping the lights on, calling all the shots. And then there's workplace accidents. 500-degree ovens, rusty nails. Danger lurks around every corner. Workplace accidents can happen, but there is an easy way to keep your employees covered. Talk to your agent about workers' comp coverage from Pi, or go to piinsurance.com and get a quote. Safety first, then Pi Insurance. Individual rates, offerings, and savings may vary, subject to policy terms and conditions. Not available in all states and situations.
Summer is upon us, and do you know what your lawn wants? It wants Revive Organic Soil Treatment upon it. A Revive treatment with fertilization, aeration, and good watering is the key to building stronger roots for a healthy, lush green lawn all summer. Revive fertilizes and moves water and nutrients deeper into the soil. You'll see the difference. Revive is surefire defense against summer drought and skyrocketing water costs. Make the most of your watering with Revive Organic Soil Treatment. Apply Revive Organic Soil Treatment today. It works.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Dave and Dujanovic.
What our listeners need to know is what's going on behind the scenes. We hold weekly meetings on how to do our jobs as talk show hosts, as journalists, better than we did them yesterday.
There's some very conservative voices. There's some very liberal voices. But there is space for both. And we're not at each other's throats. We're not yelling at each other. We're having a discussion.
Listen for Dave and Dujanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, local firefighters are protecting homes threatened by a 10,000-acre wildfire in southern Utah. Second, volunteers from Utah's Red Cross are headed to Texas to help in the aftermath of Hurricane Beryl. And third, Palm Springs got up to 124 degrees over the weekend, one of several cities in California and the West setting new heat records. 91 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
And welcome back to Inside Sources. I'm Greg Skordas, filling in today for Boyd Matheson. And I'm looking at my calendar. It's July 8th. On November 5th is Election Day, less than 4 months away. And we are talking, and we have been talking today about 3 races where we don't even know who our candidate's going to be. And I'm talking about the President of the United States. Let's be honest, we don't know who the Democratic candidate's going to be. Talking about Utah's governor. We have a lawsuit filed by his Republican challenger, Phil Lyman, that is yet to be resolved. And Utah's 2nd Congressional District, which is the subject of not only a lawsuit, but a yet-to-be counted electorate. The primary was held a couple of weeks ago, the Republican primary. In that particular race, the numbers between Colby Jenkins and Celeste Malloy are still too close to call. Colby Jenkins has requested the official vote-in ballot records from Washington County. He's filed a lawsuit to get that information because he wants to make sure, as he's absolutely entitled, that there was a free, fair, and public election, and if he lost, but he's not willing to concede that yet. And so we've had a lawsuit filed by Colby Jenkins against the Washington County clerk, that's St. George area, regarding how the mail-in ballots, which were subject to some concern. In other words, your signature on the ballot may or may not match your signature on your election registration, and how we sort of revisit that and make sure that the right person voted by mail that was supposed to vote by mail. That case was involved in a civil lawsuit that was held today. At least the first part of it was held today. They were seeking a writ of mandamus, which is a requirement that the judge order the clerk of Washington County to produce what they call the uncured ballots, those that are questioned in terms of who signed and whether the signatures match. The judge denied that writ of mandamus. That case seems to be on hold. It seems to have not gone in Colby Jenkins' favor at this point, but we don't even have the results of that election yet. And like I said, we're less than 4 months away from the general election. Second, our governor's race hasn't been decided yet, at least as it relates to the Republican candidates. Phil Lyman wins big at the caucus convention. He loses pretty modestly in the Republican primary, but he's not conceding. He's not giving up, and he has filed a lawsuit in 3rd District Court against the lieutenant governor, the director of elections, and the chief of Utah's grandma appeals for the lieutenant governor's office, saying, wait a minute, there were some votes here, some mail-in votes, and the signature gathering process that may not have been conducted just quite right. He's looked at this company called the Gathering Company, which was hired by a lot of candidates, including his opponent, Spencer Cox, to get the required 28,000 signatures. And what he's saying is, look, this company's been under some scrutiny. They're under criminal investigation, he claims, for potential fraud involving another campaign in southern Utah, and they were used to gather signatures for the Cox-Henderson campaign. They also were used in the Derek Brown for Attorney General campaign, and Brad Wilson, who ran for Senate, and he's challenging the way that the signature gathering process was done in that entire race, and asked for and is seeking information about the signature gathering. Now, people who sign the signature process often do so saying, look, I support this, but I don't want you sharing my name and address and all this information with everybody. And so they typically sign that, not realizing that maybe it's going to be subject to a grandma request. So the Lieutenant Governor's Office and the grandma request, and grandma, by that I mean the Government Records Access Management Act. If you want to seek government records, you fill out what's called a grandma request. I hope I'm not being over legal here. And requesting that information. He's filed a lawsuit saying, I'm entitled to the information. Spencer Cox, of course, is thinking, hey, I won. I got 55% of the votes at the primary. Let's move ahead. And Lyman is saying, well, you shouldn't have got to the primary in the first place because your signature gathering process was not right at the outset. We'll see where that one goes. That's a case that hasn't been resolved either. Third, talk about the President of the United States. And I'm, again, looking at the camera, looking at the screens today, looking at what's going on in our country. And people are still having conversations about who will be the presidential candidate from the Democratic Party. Biden is the presumptive winner. I mean, he's got the delegates, he's got everything he needs, and it's his to win or lose. It's also importantly his to decide when to stay in or jump out. And right now, by all indications, he's saying stay in. But there is a growing list, and maybe it's starting to dwindle a little bit, of Democrats, prominent Democrats, powerful Democrats, who are asking him to step down. I mean, a lot of us think about, well, is there some overriding powerful figure that sort of tells the Democrats what to do? It doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be Biden is in it if he wants and out if he wants. And right now he's saying all the right things that seem to imply that he's in the race. But boy, he's not getting a little love within his own party. He's scaring some Americans with his age. He frightened Americans after the debate where he fumbled, where he mumbled, where he wasn't coherent, and he's not getting any younger. And he was up against Donald Trump, who was more aggressive, more assertive, more understandable, more polished, not necessarily very accurate in anything he said, but that's Donald Trump, who by all accounts won the debate. And so Biden's looking at how bad was I hurt as a result of all that, and he's got to weigh those numbers and talk to his people and make some decisions. Does it have to be done soon? I don't know. Probably not. But it certainly should be done on or before the time of the Democratic National Convention, which is coming up probably in August or September. And if he's not the candidate, who will be? Those are questions. All three of these races are questions that we'll be seeing answers to in the future. Who knows where they're going? I'm not even going to guess. I was going to guess for you, but I'm not going to do that because it's up to what each of these cases decide, the lawsuits, and the candidates themselves. So, interesting election year coming up. I think November is going to be fascinating, and we'll see where that goes. I appreciate you joining us today on Inside Sources. Greg Skor is filling in for Boyd Matheson, and we'll see you again.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, we're counting down 16 days until the historic announcement, Salt Lake City 2034.
Good afternoon, 3 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Jeff Kaplan. We're at 91 in Salt Lake City. KSL's top story. A judge has ruled against a lawsuit from Colby Jenkins' campaign. He sued the Washington County Clerk last week to get more information about ballots in the 2nd Congressional District. We have team coverage, lawsuits over the count. Let's begin. KSL News Radio's Amy Kobabe here live with the latest. Amy?
Jeff, this is all about what are called uncured